Interesting story out of Politico about Donald Trump insiders and how they act around him because of how he reacts. Now, the Trump administration is already leaking like a sieve. There's another story out today about how furious he was at the Women's March and how the press was saying that his crowd size was not large enough. He's taking it personally. And of course, he has tremendous feelings of inadequacy. We've talked about this in the past. But now, don't take my word for it. Take his insider's word for it. And by the way, in that other story, there was a dozen anonymous officials. This administration, you know why? Because they all want to get famous. They're all Trump guys. So they're like, oh, press, over here, over here. Oh, you're going to quote me? Great, great, great. I mean, don't use my name. It's because then Mr. Trump will get very angry. But I want to have a good relationship with the press later so I can write a book or maybe get on a reality show. So the leaks have begun en masse immediately on day one. So now, you got to give Christopher Ruddy credit. I've given him credit in the past for other things as well. Now, I don't agree with him politically at all. He's the CEO of Newsmax. That's a very conservative organization. But at least he had the decency to put his name to this. And he's a friend of Trump, supports Trump. He says that he is still a little concerned because Trump is still, out there very aggressively in campaign mode, which I've told you before, I actually don't even mind. I think Obama should have been in more campaign mode. But Ruddy says if he doesn't have people who can tell him no, this is not going to go very well. And that I agree with because what Ruddy's point is that because of the presidential race, now he's surrounded himself with new guys who are all sycophants. Yes, Mr. Trump. Absolutely, Mr. Trump. And he's like, but then you encourage his worst habits. Now, why? Because he's like a child. He needs parenting. And if you're not stern with him, he'll just say, give me the toys, and then I break them. And then, oh, no, give it to me. Give me more. Oh, no, I'm mad at them. Look, we wrote here Donald Joffrey Trump. You tell me he doesn't sound like Joffrey if you watch Game of Thrones as I read you these quotes. Because let's go to our next insider. One person, as Politico explains, one person who frequently talks to Trump said aides have to push back privately against his worst impulses in the White House, like the news conference idea, that's where they lied about the crowd size, and have to control information that may infuriate him. He gets bored and likes to watch TV, this person said, so it is important to minimize that. They're babysitting. They're like, now, okay, Donnie, but not too much TV. And remember, you got to do your homework. Now, you remember, you didn't get the presidential daily briefing for a whole 6 days. You got to read it today and try to eat some of your vegetables, okay? And now all your little impulses, let's not do them in public, remember? Okay, here is that same source saying about how to reel Donald Trump back in. You can't do it in front of everyone. He's never going to admit he's wrong in front of everyone. You have to pull him aside and tell him why he's wrong. And then you can get him to go along with you. These people don't know how to get him to do what they need him to do. Again, like a child. Now, if you say it in public, then he's going to throw a temper tantrum. But if you pull him aside, maybe then you could talk sense into him or manipulate him, depending on your interpretation of that quote, right? But you got to know how to handle this guy. But it also shows us tiny, tiny, small mind. It's the same thing as Bush in this regard. They used to say about Bush, same thing they say about Trump. Last guy in the room wins. That's why Dick Cheney would not talk during, this is amazing if you don't know this, Dick Cheney would not talk during any of the meetings. He would let everybody air out all the different opinions, and then they would all leave and Cheney would stay, and then he would talk. Because Bush only listened to the last guy in the room. He'd be like, anytime anybody made a point, he'd be like, oh, that's a good one. Huh? Oh, yeah, Bobby, tall guy. Yeah, that's a good one. Oh, budget man, that's another good point. Huh? I thought of that. And they all leave, and then Cheney says, now, Mr. President, this is what I think. He's like, oh, yeah, Dick, you're right. Huh? And he did that, to be fair to Bush, he did that for the first 6 years of his presidency. Finally, in the last 2 years, he realized that Cheney was leading him astray. With Trump, same idea, but don't say it in front of anybody, because then he'll be like, oh, yeah, me right. Me not get criticized in public, right? And he'll go smash his toys or whatever he does. So now back to Ruddy. He says, the president has a modus operandi. He hits back, he strikes back. He's very impulsive at times. Doesn't it sound like they're describing a third grader? Like if I had a kid, I'd be like, oh, he's impulsive, but you got to pull him aside. Don't embarrass him in public and talk to him and say, hey, now, remember, sometimes you got to listen to your teacher, okay? Now, even the Republicans realize it. Mark Sanford, the now congressman from South Carolina, former governor of South Carolina, back from the Appalachian Trail, says, if he's responding to one reporter's view of crowd size every time, this is going to be the most unusual 4 years. And Mark Sanford would know unusual, but even Sanford, who's deeply conservative, is like, ay, what are we going to do with this child? Okay, now I like his next quote even better because it gives you an indication of what is actually happening behind the scenes. And I'll decipher it for you. First, let me give you the quote. He says, it's unconventional at best and disastrous at worst. That's a fellow conservative Republican saying that about Trump. He says, these distractions have the capacity to sink his entire administration, and they're not representative of the quite serious people he's assembled. Okay, now that last part is the most important part. Because in reality, since he's a child, he didn't pick almost anyone in his cabinet outside of his buddies and outside of the favors that he wanted to do for his business partners. So he picked Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, to pay back Russia, because Rex Tillerson has a $500 billion deal at ExxonMobil when he was CEO there that was blocked by Obama. So he's like, Russia helped me, I helped them, I give them Rex Tillerson. The guy who runs the largest oil company in Russia said his biggest dream was to come back to the U.S. because he's now blocked because of sanctions and to ride motorcycles with Rex Tillerson. He's Russia's best friend. He's got a medal from Putin. That's who Rex Tillerson. So Trump picked Rex Tillerson to pay back that debt. He picked Wilbur Ross and Carl Icahn to pay back a debt from Atlantic City when they rescued him when Taj Mahal was going belly up. But everybody else pretty much, Ben Carson's a little bit in the middle, but everybody else was pretty much picked by the RNC, the establishment Republicans. They're like, okay, which donors would like tax breaks? Which donors would like to destroy departments they've been against all along? Betsy DeVos, your family has given us hundreds of millions of dollars. Oh, you'd like to destroy the education department? Great, you're Secretary of Education. So that actually is more Reince Priebus, Sean Spicer, and the establishment Republicans than Donald Trump. Sanford's quote there is, he's assembled a good team that we basically picked for him. Now, if somebody could just get that child to listen and not cause a mess, we can go on basically pillaging the country like it was our intent. So, look, it's a fun little story because it gives you a sense of what a petulant child he is. But it's also very serious because there's a lot of people, when you have a mind of your own, you are harder to manipulate. But when you have a very, very shallow mind like Donald Trump, based almost entirely around your ego, you are very easy to manipulate. And there are a lot of folks trying to manipulate him. So there are the populists like Steve Bannon, and they're alt-right and all that xenophobia, et cetera, that they've got going on. And then there are the multinational corporate interests, the donors to the Republican Party who are trying to manipulate this child. And those guys think if we can just get him to stop tweeting and causing controversies, we'll be able to push our agenda through without anybody noticing. So he's causing a bit of a mess on his own side, and I hope he does get people exposed. The other thing I hope is that we one day have a president who isn't a child. Become a member of the Young Turks.
I think it's weird.
No, it's not. Afterwards, you'll think,
I'm like a smart person.
TUITnetwork.com/join.